nor out of the desire of the flesh, nor even out of the desire of a male individual, but out of God were born. It's a very different reading. And I know it's a little hard to follow, okay? But last week we looked at just the first 3 verses and we compared them to Genesis chapter 1. And the real summary is, obviously, John jumped right into the end game and said, look, guys, Jesus is God. Jesus created the entire earth. He existed before. He pre-existed the universe. And he made it. And then this week we're going to look at what it means when Jesus came into the world. Let's see. For those of you that weren't here, we looked at 2 things. Word, the word, which is logos, and it means more than just a word. It means the thought that precedes the word, or even the fact that precedes the spoken word. So Jesus was the existence before he was ever proclaimed. Just as creation existed in his mind, when it existed in his mind, assuming God has a mind, I don't know exactly how that would work, okay? The word, the speech comes after it forms in our head. And that's the point of logos. Beginning, we also said, had the connotation of order associated with it. And government. And the word is arche. It's the same word that's translated principalities. When we talk about we don't wrestle against principalities and powers, it means high-level spiritual beings, okay? That same word means beginning. And the reason in the Greek is that the Greeks understood that the order of the universe, the order of the world, could not exist at all without some high-level being, somewhere, somehow, being in charge. That's kind of a neat concept and one we blow through real fast. And then we talk briefly about order that was put into the world to start with, day and night, right? God created day and night. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. He did it before there was a sun, moon, and stars. So figure that one out, right? Now, whether it's a 24-hour day, I got no idea. It was God's time clock. Immediately upon creation, he created a government. And this may not register with you, but he specifically put Adam in charge of the garden. Adam was the governor of the garden. He wasn't the owner, but he was the governor. God delegated that mankind is to rule the earth. He established the government right off the bat. Obviously, he established order in things like gravity. You do know that Isaac Newton did not invent gravity, right? Everybody knows that. Think about all the things that came into being that were ordered, meaning already put in a structure before man ever came along. The fact that water boils at 212 degrees. You can like that fact or not, but you can't change it. You just can't. When it gets below 32 in the wintertime and it rains, there's going to be ice. And you can like it or not, but you can't change it. All these myriads of things are wound into beginning. It's just kind of crazy. Okay. We're going to jump into John the Baptist. Now, I'm not going to go back and read all about John the Baptist. That's in Luke chapter 1 if you want to read it. But the thing I want to point out is that John the Baptist was conceived in the mind of God before he was born. Not only before he was born, before he was conceived. Before his parents even thought it was possible, right? The story here is that an angel showed up to Zacharias, who was John the Baptist's father, when Zacharias was in the holy place doing years, okay? And the angel said, oh, by the way, your prayer has been answered. Now, this guy just appears in a place no other person's supposed to be. Zacharias was stunned and kind of said, what are you talking about? And the angel said, Elizabeth's going to bear a child. Zacharias was even more stunned because he knew what their physical capabilities were. If Marilyn told me she were pregnant, I would be shocked beyond belief, okay? That's where Zacharias was. And then God explained the purpose of John the Baptist to his father. He's coming as a precursor, basically to Christ. He's coming to prepare the way. And Zacharias couldn't speak because he didn't immediately believe. Glad that God does not treat me that way all the time, or I would never say a word. But John the Baptist came onto the scene. John the Baptist was in God's mind long before he communicated that to Zacharias and Elizabeth. Long before. He was already planned for. He was already thought of. He was already created. Remember what we talked about, logos? The thought was already there in God's heart, in God's mind. John the Baptist was already created. His body wasn't formed yet, but he was already created. The same thing is true of every single person in this room. Now, I want you to really think about that. Nobody in here is an accident. I think most of us in here come from pretty solid backgrounds and stuff, but there are a lot of people in the world who really are the product of rape. That before were all attacks on the people, on the Jews. These attacks are specifically against Nehemiah. Again, I want us to think of what it means in our lives. That's the only thing that counts right now. The history is absolutely true and verifiable. How does it apply to us, though? We've talked about the wall being like God building the church. And in fact, in the prophecy last week from Hudson Taylor, he basically said, once the church is built, just as soon as it's built, Jesus is coming back. And we'll see that. I probably won't do it this week, but maybe next week we'll look at the Jewish feast in the fall, and we find out exactly the same thing. That's exactly what it says. So it's an interesting time. The first attack was an attempt to divert the leader's attention by pulling out diplomatic tricks. Nehemiah was the governor of the Jews. That was his appointed title from the king of Persia. Sanballat was a governor or a military guy, probably of a higher rank than Nehemiah. Tobiah was a leader of theirs, and also Noadiah the prophetess and the rest of the prophets who were trying to frighten me. He was not gentle in this message. He wasn't lovey-dovey at all. This was a pretty harsh, gruff dude. The Pharisees didn't mess with him, right? They didn't mess with him. And people are going out there. They're not looking at a pastor in slick clothing or anything like that. They're not looking at somebody who was seminary trained. They're going out there, and this guy's in an old robe like a prophet. He ate locust and honey, If he didn't brush his teeth that morning, you see a locust leg hanging out of his mouth. That's who they were going to listen to. And that's who God sent. And the message was repentance. So the fact that people would go out was kind of a miracle in itself. Hey, let's go see this kook out there who eats locusts and is telling us about the coming of the Savior and getting us ready. And everybody knew about John. Those who actually went and repented were the very people who were receptive to Christ. And those who did not go or argued with him, Pharisees, Sadducees, the Jews, as it's frequently translated, but that's not the whole body, obviously. Those who rejected John the Baptist rejected Jesus. What's our role in the world? Our role is to be a witness like John the Baptist was. Now, we don't all do it the same way. Our message is not always the same. Sometimes the message is reaching out with a helping hand, hopefully to this couple up the road, or with the gas cards. That ministered to that lady. That was the love of Christ to that lady, and that's how it was communicated to that lady. But sometimes it needs to be, you know what? You need to get your head on straight. Right? Nicole needs that, and we're praying that somebody will show up. Sometimes we just need to hear. Quit going the way you're going. Quit doing stupid stuff. Quit doing stupid stuff. My dad used to say stuff like that, and it usually came with the accompanying backside of a hand or a belt. I don't know if your dad ever did it, but my dad would take his belt off and he would intentionally snap that booger. You know what I'm talking about? Pop! And you knew it was coming. That was almost as bad as the lick. All right? Sometimes we need that to quit doing stupid stuff. All right, so verse 9 reverts back to Jesus, and I want to read it. There was the true light, which coming into the world enlightens every man. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and those who were his own did not receive him. Okay, this is another Greek word that I want us to look at, world. It doesn't just mean the globe, right? It doesn't mean the universe at all, even though it was translated that way in the previous Greek passage. It means an ordered system. A global ordered system is literally what it means. It's almost always with a negative connotation associated with it, meaning evil. It's a bent going the wrong way. Now, God created the cosmos initially. He didn't create it evilly, right? We corrupted it when we handed it over to Satan. And so the world order became corrupted. And it has stayed corrupted. Yet that's what Jesus came into. And when we get to John 3:16, I want you to remember, we're not going to do that tonight, but God so loved the world. He so loved the order that he created, and mankind specifically that he placed in it, that he gave his only begotten Son. Now, the world order is against Christ. It does not take a rocket scientist to figure that out. At this point, we can pretty well go to any country in the world and you figure out that the supreme powers are against God at a fundamental level. They may go to church, they may talk nice, but they're not really there. And this is beyond all political parties and any organization you can think of, right? It's easy to see with the Taliban. It's easy to see with Iran. Should be easy to see in Saudi Arabia. But it's the same way in Israel. It's the same way in the U.S. It's the same way in every Western country. It's the same way in Japan, that way in China, that way in Australia. Everywhere you go, the root system is against God. It just is. If it were not that way, we would find a country where the people were happy, they were prosperous, they had plenty of rain, There was light, no depression, no suicide, no murder. Anybody know of a place like that? Well, that's good. That's in Amish country. Okay. There was in that same vein, years and years and years ago, there was a record of a revival that occurred in a town in Guatemala. And it was a place known for people being in jail, basically, drinking, worshiping the dead, and all this kind of stuff. The entire town was converted, and the jails closed down. But I don't see that in South Carolina or in Anderson. And that's what we need. Anyway, the point is, Jesus loved the world enough to come, and he enlightens every man. Jesus is the light, and that is repeated a bunch of times. In Romans 1:19 and 20, I think maybe I'll read that. I'm sure we don't have time, but I'm going to read it anyway. It says this, because that which is known about God is evident within them, meaning all of humankind. For God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what's been made, so that every man is without excuse. Meaning, if you seriously look around at the order leap of stupidity, but if you want to use the word faith, to think that everything out there, all these trillions and trillions of stars and galaxies and all that kind of stuff that we can't even see, just suddenly evolved. That's dumb. That's even beyond dumb. But that's the way we are as men. Jesus came to bring light on the earth, and his entrance into the earth